Right everyone, it is Finn here and welcome back to another World Cup Wednesday, where of course today I'm going to be giving you my World Cup playoff predictions. Because as we know, most teams have already snatched up their spot at Qatar at the end of the year. But of course there are still 3 spots remaining, and in today's video we're going to be discussing which 3 teams will be going to Qatar at the end of the year. Now of course, starting off, we will be looking at the European teams first. Now the way that things will work is the likes of Scotland will be playing the likes of Ukraine, and the winner of them will end up playing against Wales to decide who goes to the World Cup. And the big question is, will Wales bail out early? I'm so sorry. But of course the first game that we will be talking about will be the Scotland-Ukraine game. Now of course, looking at the likes of Scotland, the last time they qualified for a World Cup was 1998. Of course they would absolutely love to go to a tournament like this. And of course I have to say I was slightly impressed with them in the recent Euros. Yes, of course they didn't make it that far in the competition, but they had some very promising moments. If only their attackers had a bit more firepower in that game, I think they could have made it really far. But of course, looking at the likes of Ukraine, they are currently undefeated in the World Cup qualification process. And of course, with the whole war going on at the moment, I've got a slight suspicion that the entire world, all neutrals in the world of football, will kind of be backing Ukraine. Everything that's happened to them over the last year, people will kind of want them to qualify for this competition. But of course, if you have to look at these two teams on paper, I think it is going to be so incredibly close. Of course, looking at the likes of Ukraine, they've got some fantastic players, they've had some fantastic performances. I thought that they were really good in the recent Euros, and as I said, currently undefeated, they could so easily beat Scotland to qualify for this competition. Saying that though, I do believe Scotland have the better players on paper, and if only they could perform super well as a team, they would be such a dangerous threat. I mean, players like Che Adams really have to pick up an attack if he wants to really show his worth up front for the Scotland national team. He has to prove that him swapping international allegiances was worth it. But of course, looking at these two teams right now, who do I think will end up playing Wales in the final stage of the qualification process? Now of course, it is not going to be an easy decision to make whatsoever, and a big part of me wants to say Scotland. I mean, I'm a United fan, I would love to see Scott McTominay in the competition, but something down below does tell me that Ukraine will be able to qualify. I do think Ukraine will be facing Wales in the next stage. I'm sorry Scotland, it is what it is. And of course Wales, that means that they will be taking on the likes of Ukraine. Now of course, what a massive game this will be, and obviously the winner of this game will be placed in Group B for the World Cup with the likes of England, USA and Iran. That is not an easy group whatsoever. And of course, looking at Wales, looking at them, the last time they qualified for a World Cup was 1958. That is like 60 years ago. That is an insane amount of time. Of course, do I think that they can beat the likes of Ukraine? As I said, I think it will be incredibly close. Ukraine undefeated at the moment in qualification process. But to be honest with you, I do think Wales will qualify for the World Cup. I think they will be the team to make it through to the next stage. Obviously, looking at Wales, I've been very impressed with them in recent national competitions. I mean, in the recent Euros, I thought that they had a really good performance, despite the fact that they lost 4-0 to Denmark. Other than that, we know when Wales switch on, they can be such a fantastic team. Defensively, they've got decent players. Midfield-wise, we know they've got a plethora of brilliant talent. Of course, in attack, I mean, Gareth Bale, we know how brilliant he can be. Of course, this is set to be his last ever national competition, which would be really sad. But of course, can he qualify them for the competition? And I do think Wales will end up going to the World Cup at the end of the year. Once again, it's not going to be an easy decision to make whatsoever. As I said, I do think Ukraine will beat Scotland to make it to the next stage, probably 2-1. And of course, Wales versus Ukraine, I think Wales will end up winning. Once again, maybe another 2-1. I think it will be a very close game. Now, of course, heading into our next stage of qualifications, we've got the likes of Peru, who will be playing either Australia or the UAE. Now, of course, looking at that Australia versus UAE game, it is not going to be an easy game to predict whatsoever. Now, of course, looking at Australia in qualifications, I will admit I've been slightly disappointed with them. Of course, they came 3rd place under the likes of Japan and Saudi Arabia, and in fact, their game versus them, it didn't really look that convincing. I haven't been that convinced with Australia's performances. Of course, as I said, they ended 3rd in their qualifications, and the same go for the likes of the UAE. And of course, as I said, on paper, it is going to be so close between these two teams. But of course, looking at the United Arab Emirates, I mean, the last time they played Australia was only about 3 years ago in 2019, where they ended up beating them. So you know what? I do believe that the country, or from down under, or I guess Australia's just referred down under. I don't know, this joke isn't working. How do I escape from it? But of course, I do believe that Australia, not just known as the Down Under, will go down under the United Arab Emirates.
Nice.
I don't think that they'll end up getting a result. As I said, just looking at the UAE, I think they've been slightly more convincing in their qualification process, and I do think that they will end up just taking a win, and I'm going to go with a 1-0 win. Now, of course, I don't think it really matters because in their next game versus Peru, I believe whether it was Australia or the UAE, I do think Peru will be the team to qualify for the competition. No offense to the likes of the UAE, I think they've got some brilliant players. I think they've got some brilliant players in attack, but looking at Peru, I've been so impressed with them in recent times. I mean, looking at them, obviously, I thought they were really good in the 2018 World Cup, although they didn't make it that far. They put forward some really decent performances, and of course, looking at them in the qualifications, I mean, I would say that they're given probably the most difficult qualification process. Obviously, looking at South America, to qualify above the likes of Colombia and Chile, we cannot sleep. We cannot underestimate the likes of Peru. I mean, I think that they could really hand over a few surprises. I think attacking-wise, defensively, I think they're better than the UAE and Australia, and that is why I think that they should get a relatively comfortable 3-1 win. And of course, that would put Peru in the likes of Group D. As we know, it is not going to be an easy group whatsoever, as they do have the likes of Tunisia, Denmark, and France. It is a very tricky group, but I do think that they'll end up qualifying. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, that takes us to our last qualification game, kind of known as the Oceanic game, between the likes of Costa Rica and New Zealand. But of course, looking at the likes of Costa Rica, obviously they kind of qualified or got to the stage through the CONCACAF kind of qualification process. And as we know, the North American teams and the Central American teams, it is not a super easy qualification to make it through. Of course, versus the likes of Canada, Mexico, and USA, of course, they did end up 4th place compared to the rest. But saying that, as we know, Costa Rica have got such a solid team. If they qualify for this World Cup, it will be their 3rd consecutive World Cup that they've gone to, and that by itself is so impressive. Obviously, also looking at the likes of New Zealand, once again looking at them, I don't think we can totally underestimate them, but we do have to look at the fact, and I don't mean this in any offensive way, but New Zealand do have a slightly easier way of qualifying for the tournament. Of course, the competition around the oceanic countries, it is slightly easier for them to qualify, where although Costa Rica don't have the most difficult, it is slightly harder. Obviously, looking at New Zealand, they did just win versus the Solomon Islands 5-0 in their recent game. So of course, you do have to look at that. But of course, I think just looking at New Zealand overall versus Costa Rica, it is going to be a very tight competition. But of course, looking at Costa Rica, I mean, of course, the player that comes to mind has to be the likes of good old Keylor Navas. And do I think he's going to concede a goal versus the likes of Chris Wood? To be honest with you, he might end up being Deadwood in a game like that. Look, obviously no disrespect to him. He's gotten something like 33 goals in 65 games for the New Zealand national team. That, of course, is very impressive. But compared to the likes of Costa Rica, we've seen more from them on the international stage over the last few years, although both teams very impressive in 2014, funnily enough. But I do think Costa Rica will end up winning this one, and I'm going to put forward a 2-1 win, to be honest with you. And I do believe that they will be placed in Group E, which, by the way, what an insanely difficult group that is going to be as well. I mean, once again, you can't be too surprised. I don't think there are any super easy groups at this World Cup. I mean, they're going to end up going against the likes of Japan, Germany, and Spain. Once again, none of these teams, it's not going to be an easy route to qualify for the competition, but those are the 3 teams that I think will qualify for the World Cup. As I said, I do think it is going to be the likes of probably Wales, I do think it will be Peru, and I do think it will be Costa Rica. Once again, we'll see if that ends up happening. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to put down in the comment section down below, what are your predictions for these games? Who do you think will qualify for the World Cup? Once again, as we know, football, an absolutely beautiful game where absolutely anything can happen, anytime, anyone can qualify for this competition. I mean, for all I know, New Zealand could qualify for this competition. Once again, the world would love Ukraine to qualify for this competition, but once again, as I said, just looking at things statistically, those are my predictions, and that's what I think will happen. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to subscribe down below if you did end up enjoying this video. Of course, don't forget to hit that like button down below to remind me that you do end up enjoying these World Cup Wednesday videos, where of course I upload a World Cup related video every single Wednesday leading up to the World Cup. I don't think I've missed one yet. Of course, I have really been enjoying them. You guys seem to be enjoying them too. Once again, good luck to all teams that still have to qualify, and I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, this has been your boy Finn, FYNN. Until next time, cheers.